Good morning. We're live with Dr. J. Mitchell Perry. Today we're going to be talking about the 9 questions on happiness you must consider. And here's Dr. J. Mitchell Perry.
Good morning. Good morning. What is today? Today is Tuesday, and welcome to Tuesday. Very happy to be here. I'm Dr. Perry, and we're going to see if we can make an ongoing series of live presentations on Tuesday mornings and Friday mornings. Mike, does that sound right? Tuesday and Friday mornings?
Tuesday and Friday, right here live.
That's right. There we go. Okay, and if I understand this correctly, we've got a series of questions, Mike, you're going to ask me, particularly as it relates to being highly effective and happy. Some of those questions might be some kinds of questions you've thought of. On the other hand, as I keep going here in today's recording or the live presentation, if you have some comments or you have some questions you want to ask, just fill them out. Put them on screen, and Mike will translate them to me. So let's begin with question number 1 on how to be effective and happy.
All right. Question number 1. Can you worry yourself to happiness?
Well, let me see if I understand this. Can you worry yourself to happiness? Well, I do believe that it's entirely likely that there's a relatively significant population of American citizens, and perhaps a whole bunch from the rest of the world, who actually believe that if they worry and catastrophize and awfulize long enough, then they'll be happy. I think the answer is if you want to be happy and highly functional, and you practice worrying and catastrophizing, then the likelihood that you are going to be really happy and functional following awfulizing and obsessing is about as likely as we will have paid off our national debt by Tuesday. So the answer is no. The reality is that people who awfulize and worry all the time and obsess and get scared and allow their emotions to run away with them, they generally are more and more that way. For example, have you known, Mike, men or women who worry a lot, and once they start worrying, they get spun up and worry more?
Yeah, definitely.
Same thing with people who are angry. Do you ever notice that people who are generally angry, and you say, hey, what's going on? And then they get wound up in the story about what made them angry. Do you notice that they get angrier?
Right.
Well, so if you're thinking, gee, if I worry a lot and I obsess a lot, then I'm going to be happy. The answer is no, you're going to be very skilled at worrying and obsessing.
Second question, Dr. Perry. If someone is a worrier,
yeah,
what steps can they take to happiness?
Well, that's a real good question. I've lost count of all the people I've worked with over several decades who are professional worriers. And most of them, their default is to be anxious about something. Much of the time, they're anxious because they feel like they have to be on guard or prepared for anything awful that might come along. So if people want to be happy, then the very first thing you have to do is you have to say, okay, generally, when you are happy, what are you noticing? And if you think about it, if you are having a moment of happiness and you worry all the time, then it's entirely possible you'll say, gee, I don't know that I should be happy. I mean, is this a good thing or is there something awful that's going to happen? So if your default is to worry a lot about all kinds of stuff or have what we call in the business free-floating anxiety, if your default is to worry, the likelihood that you're going to actually develop some form of happiness is very, very low. So what you have to do is say, okay, when I have those experiences when I'm happy, then what am I noticing? Very often you're going to be noticing you're smiling or you're laughing or you're feeling content or you're exhaling and decompressing. You also may notice that the more you have happy experiences, you'll have more of them. And moreover, you'll notice more of your happy experiences are when you are doing something with people you care about and you're enjoying the closeness. Moreover, you may notice just being with people that you care about which, by the way, is a wonderful time to do that now because it's entirely possible you're still at home. And if you're still at home, the people that you presumably care about are at home with you. So rather than considering that a prison sentence, what you could actually do is enjoy the people for whom you have affection and regard and respect and caring and closeness. If you actually pay attention to that, and moreover, if you have children, for example, children are generally better at being happy than you are if you're an adult. So if you start doing stuff with your children that allows them to enjoy something, then you can get into it yourself. An example is if you start acting as if you are wrapped up in what your kids are wrapped up in, then after about 10 or 15 minutes, you actually become wrapped up in it. So therefore, if it's fun, if it's something you enjoy, and you start thinking, I can actually enjoy life, then your need to worry is substantially less.
Okay, our next question, question 3 of
Yes.
the 9 questions on happiness today, Dr. Perry. True or false? Your thoughts become your reality.
Oh, yeah. That's it. That is a board certified true. Yes, that's exactly right. One of the things I say all the time is if you, back again to anger or worry or catastrophizing, awfulizing, or deluding yourself. A lot of people do the delude themselves. You ever hear people say things like, I like to think this, or I like to believe that. You ever heard people do that?
Yeah.
If they say, I like to think this, or I like to believe that, that would therefore suggest that they really have trouble with the way reality is. And so they want to package it differently so they feel better about it. So if you think about the nature of the question, you have to decide what is your default. When I say your default, what is the automatic channel you go to when it looks like you're in the habit of thinking or feeling or behaving the way you usually do? And if you think your default is to be angry or to be suspicious or to be sad or to be worrying or to feeling doubt or feeling suspicious, if the default is to go to that and it's an automatic thing out of sheer habit, then the likelihood that whatever you're thinking about or whatever you're feeling at the time about any situation, you're going to continue. If you are cranky, let's suppose you're cranky. Let's suppose you have to have control. You have to have a place for everything and everything in its place. If you are a neatnik and you're obsessive compulsive and you have to have it the way you have to have it and you get upset unless everything is in order, then the likelihood you're ever going to really be enjoying life is relatively low because now you have this need for perfection, which of course you have yet to ever achieve. So it really comes down to, you got to notice, how do you behave? Are you cranky a lot? Are you disappointed a lot? Are you cynical a lot? Think about that. Are you cynical? If you've turned highly cynical, it's entirely possible that what you have done is you have, over a period of time, gotten your feelings hurt, or you've gotten your heart broken, or you've been betrayed, or something. What you need to notice about being chronically cynical is cynicism is essentially a state of mind that you have adopted over time because you've been let down or betrayed or abandoned, or you used to believe in something and now your ideals have been crushed. Cynicism essentially is a state of mind that says, I refuse to believe again. Let me do that again. Cynicism is a state of mind that says, I refuse to believe again. So if you're chronically cynical, then you may be saying, well, I used to believe in this, but I got my heart broken, so I don't believe in that anymore. I used to be, let's say, a very devout Catholic, and then I noticed what the Catholic Church was doing, and now I don't believe in that anymore. Or I used to believe in love and marriage, and then I had a divorce and it was ugly, and so now I don't do that anymore. Or I used to believe that people were really good, but now I've been betrayed so much that I just think people are horrible. They're just selfish and narcissistic, and they should be deported. The reality is, cynicism is a way of saying, I used to believe, I refuse to believe anymore. Therefore, my default is to feel cynical. Good news about cynicism is you actually will enjoy being cynical with other people. Many comedians, you will notice their act is all about being very cynical. And the good news is it's fun and it's funny. That's the good news about being cynical. The bad news about being cynical is you basically lose your ability to enjoy life because the default is always to feel cynical. So if you overdo cynicism, the likelihood that you're going to keep doing it ad nauseum is very high.
Number 4, Dr. Perry, 9 questions on happiness here. Focus on the what and the how will be taken care of.
Well, the answer is no. You got to do some form of both. If you ever hear someone say, how about you're looking at somebody who's upset, somebody you care about, and they're upset, and you say, what is going on? And then they start describing what's going on. Mike, do you ever notice people are upset? You say, what's going on? Then they describe it, and then they just keep describing it. You ever notice that?
Yes.
Okay. So have you ever talked to somebody you care about? They're upset. You find out what's going on. They keep describing it, and then you give them advice on what to do differently. Yes?
Yep.
How well does that work generally?
Yeah, usually they don't integrate the advice.
Exactly. They'd rather describe the problem than solve it. So my recommendation is, rather than spending so much time describing what is going on, my recommendation is think about how you might make it different. If I say, well, don't do that, Mike, because that's a dumb idea, because you know how you are when you get so upset, we're still describing the problem. If I say, hey, Mike, what are your thoughts about how you might approach this differently? And then you start thinking, well, how might I approach this differently? Supposing I say, well, that's one idea. You give me answer A, and I say, well, A is one idea. What else comes to mind on how you might approach this differently? If I ask you a series of how are you going to do it differently, and you give me several options, are you going to start changing your point of view?
Yeah, probably. I'll be thinking about it differently.
Yeah, my experience is generally another thing that parents do is you have children and your kids are behaving poorly. Just imagine, by the way, Mike, you have kids and they're behaving poorly. Oh yeah, I forgot you have kids. Do they behave poorly on occasion?
Yeah, I don't have to imagine that one.
Okay, good. And could we say clearly when they're behaving poorly, they are now completely contaminated by the genetic impurities of your in-laws? Okay, so if your kids are behaving poorly, have you ever gone up to them when they're behaving poorly and you say, why are you doing that? Or why did you do that? Have you ever done that one?
Yeah.
Okay. And you, if I recall correctly, you have boys. Is that right?
3 boys.
3 boys, and they're young, right?
8, 6, and 4.
So let me ask you this. Whenever you say to your boys, why did you do that? Do your boys generally do something like this? I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Okay. The problem is you're making the illusion that the kid is going to actually reflect on his behavior and come up with a brilliant answer. So supposing your kids are behaving poorly, and rather than saying, why are you doing that, which is sort of what's the reason for your behavior? Supposing you were to say, okay, question, how well did that one work? How well is this behavior working for you? And he'll say, well, it's not very good. And then you can say, okay, how might you do it differently going forward? Will your child change his thinking when he's asked, how could he do it differently?
Yeah, he'll try to answer that question.
Exactly. And if he says, I don't know again, then you can say, well, what are your thoughts about doing it like this? And what's interesting is my experience is most of my private patients over many years will say things like, I don't know why I do that. I got to stop doing that. Whenever people say, I don't know why I do that, I got to stop doing that, the likelihood they're going to stop it is remote. On the other hand, if you say to a friend of yours you care about, and you say, how might you do it differently? Then they're going to start thinking about replacing the counterproductive habit with something that might be more effective. So is the what important? Yes. And the how is more important than the what.
All right. And our next question, number 5, goes on, and this is a true or false question.
Okay.
Emotions are amplifiers. True or false?
That's absolutely true. Emotions are amplifiers. I'll give you an example. Do you notice you have somebody in your family who worries and catastrophizes? Yes?
Yeah.
When probably she, when she gets emotionally spun up, does it appear as if she gets more spun up?
Sure.
Then when you say, pull yourself together, there's no reason for you to blow this out of proportion this way. You're getting out of control. Does that help?
No.
No. So could we say emotions are very often going to be spun up because more emotion creates more amplification? Yes?
Yeah.
And so therefore, could we say that emotions are amplifiers for good outcomes, which means good emotions are amplifiers for good outcomes? And could we also say bad emotions are also amplifiers for bad outcomes?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the deal. What you want to do is, of course, be aware of your emotions as much as possible. Therefore, in particular, what you want to do is harvest and develop the good emotions, the ones that you really like, the ones that seem to get you to be productive, the ones that seem to improve your self-respect, rather than be hostage to getting out of control. When you get out of control, you get mad, you get angry, you get worried, you get condemning, you get critical, you get impatient. There's a variety of emotions that just will blow up like a flamethrower in the same kind of a way, although it's a bad emotion, that when you're really having a good time and you want to enjoy the experience, you'll notice that when you start laughing, sometimes you just keep laughing. Is that true?
Right.
Yeah. And by the way, watching people laugh very often will make you laugh. Is that right?
Right. Right.
Yeah. So my thoughts are the following. Do emotions carry you away? And the answer is yes. Sometimes they carry you away in which you would really like to have more of that. And other times they carry you away around which you feel regret or remorse or stupid, or ones you really feel badly because you really hurt their feelings, or you were rude, or you were critical or impatient or destructive or something. And so the reality is what you want to do is be as aware of your emotions as you possibly can. Then what you want to do, it's kind of like exercise to keep yourself in shape. You want to focus on enjoying the good emotions and the good outcomes as much as possible. And then you want to put some kind of a governor on the bad emotions that either take you away or they put a whole lot of scar tissue in relationships. I'll tell you about this one. Have you ever gotten really mad at somebody and you want to write them an email or a text that's really nasty?
Yes, I have.
Yes. Now, have you, in growing up and learning lessons the hard way, on occasion, you push send to the text or the email, and then by the next day, the really nasty email made it worse?
Yes.
So could we say, if you really want to write a nasty letter to somebody, it's a good idea to wait overnight before you push send?
Right.
Now, the reason for that is your emotions really got wound up and you really want to pay them back and you really want them to suffer. How dare they treat you the way they did? At which point, by the next day, you've decompressed and now you've got a little bigger handle on your own common sense and your own ability to control yourself. So generally, most knowledgeable parents will say, or relatives will say, how about you sit on that email before you push send? Because you feel differently the next day. Well, that's a function of wisdom. And furthermore, when you do wait till the next day, the likelihood you're going to push send is much, much lower. And then you realize your behavior that's now wiser is helping you to increase your own self-respect rather than be hostage to the upsetting emotions, which could have made things worse.
Question number 6, Dr. Perry, going on the 9 questions on happiness you must consider. True or false? Like attracts like.
Well, yes, like does attract like. Does that mean that if I like to eat a lot and I'm way overweight, then I will attract other people who eat a lot and way overweight? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like attracts like. So the same thing with regards to your feelings. If you feel happy, you attract other happy events.
Yes.
If you feel sad, you attract sad events.
Yes, that's generally true. For example, do you know people who feel sorry for themselves a lot?
Yeah.
Do they generally want to whine about their circumstances?
Right. Yep.
Therefore, when they're whining about their circumstances, do they want to have a receptive audience that says, oh, yes, that must be so difficult for you?
Right.
Well, let's suppose you're the kind of person that really is unimpressed with people who are feeling sorry for themselves. Supposing you are disinterested in getting in the contest of who's the most oppressed person. Suppose you're the kind of person that wants to be productive, you want to enjoy life, you want to contribute to society, and the last thing you want to do is wallow around in their self-pity. Got it?
Okay.
So, question. If that's the way you like to do it, then are you likely to attract people who want to feel sorry for themselves?
No.
No. But will you attract people that want to be more like you?
Right.
Yeah. That's why, for example, people who are way overweight hang around people who are way overweight. People who are pretty fit and slim and enjoying life hang around people like that. Educated people hang around educated people. Uneducated people hang around uneducated people. People who have a really good command of the language generally hang around people who speak really eloquently. So what's certainly true is whatever it is you seem to like, you're going to hang around people like that, or they're going to hang around you. That's true.
Number 7.
Yes.
On today's list. Number 7. Is it better to focus on small steps or big steps when seeking happiness?
Well, my thoughts are the following. Have you ever heard of something called the big picture or the macro view?
Yeah.
Right. The macro view is the big, the long, the broad, the wide, or what we'll call strategic. Strategic would be the big, the long, the wide, that kind of thing. And time goes by pretty quickly. Now, the micro view are the little steps along the way, the details. So you'll notice, by the way, Mike, that some of the people you hang around or people with whom you work or associate, you will notice some people really are big thinkers and they think long and broad and wide, and they're factoring forward several months or several years in advance. You'll also notice other people who are really wrapped up in the details, and they like the micro view and they get very concerned about the next steps. Well, could we say if you're in a company, it's probably a good idea to have some people, often leadership, that are thinking in the big picture routinely. And it's also a good idea to have other people thinking about the micro, the steps, the details along the way, the tactical. Yes?
Yes.
Well, so therefore, for example, if I think in my company, I tend to be a much more strategic thinker, which is for me a good fit. And do I think the details are really important? And the answer is yes. I think the detail and the tactical are very important. I also think it's very important that they get done as somebody else, as long as somebody else does it. So I've got people working for me who are very tactical oriented, and I've also got other people working for me who are strategic. And my thoughts are, the answer is it's a good idea to have both. And if you're in an organization where you're trying to have a high level of functioning, it's a real good idea to embrace both. And more than half the time, you'll have people that are much more tactical, which is important because lots of those little things have to be taken care of. And then you'll have other people who think much more big picture and are much less likely to be A plus B is equal to C. When you have those together, when you're hiring somebody, it's a good idea. Okay, do you want somebody more strategic? Do you want somebody more tactical? And you'll notice your kids too, or your extended families. Some of your extended family think in big picture routinely more than half the time, and some people in your family think much more tactically. You'll notice neatniks are really into tactical because it has to be details all the time. So neatniks want to fix you. You ever notice that?
Right.
Yeah. And you think to yourself, wait a second, am I broken? So at the end of the day, it's both. You got to be thinking, what are you good at? And then surround yourself with people who think differently than you. And if you're a neatnik and you really want to take care of the tactical all the time, then you let those people clean your house for you.
Question number 8, 9 questions on happiness. Is it better to have a general goal or a specific goal when pursuing happiness?
A general goal or a specific goal? Well, we're sort of in that strategic versus tactical. Have you ever heard in sales talk, there's what we call the target, and then there's the goal? You ever heard of that?
Yeah.
The goal would be if the weather was perfect and everything was grand, then the goal would be right up here, and that would be just terrific. So that's the goal. And a lot of sales organizations say, and our target is here. The target that's here is the one that if the weather's bad some of the time or life gets in the way, I want to hit this target, and the goal is bigger than that. So is the big goal more important than the target or the realistic goal? The answer is a lot of people think the really big goal is a motivator, and some other people think that the target is where you really need to hit. It comes down to which is going to get your attention for the most energy spent. Which is going to get your attention for the most energy spent. Some people have what we call it'll do. The target's good. Let's go for the target. And the reason why they're doing that is because they're saying, let's do enough to be able to hit the target as opposed to getting bigger than that. Big picture thinkers often will say, no, let's go for the goal. And so my thoughts are as follows. When you are functioning really well, then you're going to give yourself permission to think about the real goal and how realistic is that and shoot for that. And then you're going to have something you consider the baseline from which you want to hit your outcomes. Some people have this notion that, oh, I don't want to go that big because why do I want to spend that much time and energy to do that? So I'll just do good enough. I worked with one organization years ago, and I tend to be a strive for excellence kind of guy. You've been around me for a while, Mike, and would you say generally I'm all about excellence?
Yeah, definitely.
So I worked with an organization years ago to resolve a conflict and get the public sector group and a private sector group that had to work together to resolve some conflicts. So we were getting there, and towards the end of it, then we figured out what are the outcomes that are pretty good in our agreements. And we focused on the agreements, and I said, so now let's figure out how we're going to reach that to an extraordinarily high level. And they looked at me and they said, no, Dr. Perry, we don't need to do that. And I said, what, you just like excellence? And they said, yeah, we around here, we do the 75% solution. And I said, 75%? And they said, yes. And I said, I give up. What's the 75% solution? And then they said, 75% is good enough. And at that point, I immediately realized, I'm a excellence kind of guy, and they're a 75% group. And so it was clear to me that I needed to have them be successful with somebody else. So are both important? Yes. kind of like strategic and tactical. It's a good idea to surround yourself with people who are willing to pay the freight to get the target. And it's also important to have some more ambitious people or more creative people who would be influence advisors around which you could get motivated to go beyond the target. There you go.
Number 9 comes in, and number 9 is what you focus on expands.
Oh boy, that is absolutely true. What you focus on expands. My experience is, let's do this one. Mike, do you like ice cream?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Is a regular ingestion of ice cream, particularly your favorite flavors, important for your mental health?
Yes, I'll say yes.
So have you historically eaten too much ice cream?
Yes.
So when you say, I got to stop eating ice cream, or you say, I refuse to eat any more ice cream, what do you think about?
Oh, I think that sounds painful.
Yes. So therefore, are you focusing on ice cream if you were denied ice cream?
Yes.
Yeah. Whatever you focus on expands. If you focus on, well, let's do the Hallmark Channel. The Hallmark Channel on television is one of the most addictive programs, largely to women in this country. There's a colossal population of women who watch the Hallmark Channel. So here's the question. Do a lot of women watch the Hallmark Channel routinely?
Yes.
And could we say that regardless of the fact that most all the movies are essentially the same movie, would you say a whole bunch of women really like those kind of movies?
Yes.
So therefore, is it true that what they focus on expands?
Yes.
Yes. People, how about this one? Do you notice chronically unemployed people very often have trouble getting a job?
Right. Yes.
Is that because they're being victimized and denied, or because they have trouble with the concept of showing up and following through?
Yeah, probably the latter.
Exactly. So what you focus on expands. Do you ever notice chronically successful people are focusing on how to prevail and get it done and have a lot of fun doing it? Well, it really comes down to, are you willing to pay whatever freight is necessary to do what you want to do? And it comes down to, is your default to feel inadequate, or is your default to say, I got to figure it out, I got to prevail? At the end of the day, what you focus on does expand. If you grew up in a dysfunctional family, which most all people do, you have to understand that if you decided over a period of time, which is almost always unconscious, if you decided that you were really hurt and you were somehow damaged in growing up in a dysfunctional family, then do you actually think that you're defective? Yes or no?
Yes.
So if you think you're defective, then are you likely to keep thinking you're defective when it comes to a new opportunity that's presented to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I know a lot of people that grew up in a dysfunctional family, and they are repeating the family pathology. And so their family now that they've created is equally as dysfunctional. On the other hand, there's a variety of people who grow up in a dysfunctional family with a lot of abuse and nastiness and really counterproductive stuff, and they somehow decided to prevail. They decided, I'm going to be better, stronger, brighter, shinier as I grow up than be some form of defective and crippled and whining and weak and stupid. You'll notice some people hang on to jobs that they hate, and yet they still do the job. And they have this, well, I could never get another job like this. And my thoughts are exactly. So you really have to decide what you focus on in the first place. People who are chronic victims are always whining about their circumstances, and they're somehow disenfranchised, and they will say, what have you done for me lately? And there are other people that somehow manage to prevail. They pay whatever freight is necessary to make life much better for them. So what I would say to you is, if life is going great for you, you probably did that. If life stinks, you probably did that too. And if life is a whole new level of beige and underwhelming, you probably did that too. So I'm a firm believer that what you focus on expands. And the reality is, if you focus on, for example, exercising every day, Mike, you and I have talked about that. If you focus on making sure you exercise to some degree every day, then will that expand and you'll keep doing it?
Yes.
Yeah. It's just like eating right or being nice to people or saying thank you or showing up on time or following through or doing what you say you're going to do or contributing to society. The reality is that the lion's share of your life in terms of how happy or unhappy it is, the lion's share of that is impacted by what you choose to do and what you focus on. It comes down to focus on doing well and then paying the freight and doing it. Or focus on being weak and stupid and then feeling weak before you even start. What's interesting about this is that could sound obvious. That could sound like common sense. And as you well know, Mike, common sense is very uncommon.
Dr. Perry, we want to invite folks to put a comment in if they would like. And if they're watching this after we turn off the live, we can address it through the comments. We do have a note here from Kelly. Kelly puts in the comments, she says, "Good morning from Florida. It's good to be able to see and hear you." That's from Kelly in Florida.
Kelly, my dear, how incredibly nice of you to write in. And I just am so touched and pleased that you're watching. And thank you so much for your kind remarks. My best to you, and stay safe.
Now, Dr. Perry, we'll be on again Friday morning at 9 a.m.
Yes.
And we'll be talking about something specific to a training. So Tuesdays are going to be Q&A and Fridays are going to be training.
Exactly. The reality is this is where a form of how you're going to get your piano lesson. If you want to play piano, you got to get some help, and then you got to practice the piano. If you want to get good at anything, you got to get some help, and then you got to practice a lot. And when you practice a lot at anything, the practice some could be really bad behavior, or I would encourage you to operate from common sense and much more effective behavior. And remember, embrace the obvious. The paradox is that which is obvious and is right in front of your face, and the hardest thing to do is to see what's right in front of your face. Furthermore, common sense, of course, everybody knows that common sense, they know what it is. Now we just have to actually do what we already know. Those of you who are familiar with my work, you've heard me say that, or you've read it over a period of time, and I certainly wish you well. And be safe, and tell people you care about that you care about them, and reach out to people and ask how they're doing. The more you focus on how they are doing, the more you're touching their lives. When their lives are touched, then your life is touched in return.